Title: Amelia and Eira's Magical Winter Adventure. Chapter 1: Into the Heart of Winter. Amelia and Eira set out from their village as the morning light faintly touched the snowy peaks. They were bundled in thick, fur-lined cloaks, the only warmth against the biting wind that seemed to grow fiercer with each step. Snowflakes whipped across their faces, and the sisters had to shout to hear one another over the roar of the storm. The snow crunched under their boots as Amelia and Eira made their way through the vast, wintry landscape. The early morning sky was cast in a pale pink glow, the first light barely reaching the towering peaks around them. Their breath came in visible puffs, dissolving into the biting air as they trudged forward. Amelia glanced back at their village, a distant cluster of lights fading behind a veil of swirling snow. She gripped her sister's hand tightly. "Keep close, Eira," she called over the howl of the wind, her voice nearly swallowed by the storm. Eira nodded, her eyes narrowed against the flurry of snowflakes that whipped mercilessly across her face. She tightened her hold on her cloak, feeling the fur-lined hood press warmly against her cheeks, but barely shielding her from the relentless cold. The wind seemed to tug at them, as though trying to force them back. But the sisters pressed on, determined to discover the storm's dark secret. Their surroundings transformed as they climbed higher, the familiar forest path giving way to dense, snow-covered trees that stood like ancient guardians. Icicles dangled from the branches, glittering in the dim light, and the ground was a thick carpet of snow, untouched and pristine. The silence of the forest was eerie, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch and the constant, low wail of the wind. "Do you think this storm is really cursed?" Eira shouted, her voice filled with a mix of fear and wonder. Amelia met her gaze, her own eyes filled with quiet resolve. "If there's even a chance, we have to find out, for the village and for everyone." Together, they braced themselves and pushed forward into the heart of the snowstorm, unaware of the mysteries and dangers waiting for them on their path. The wild journey had only just begun. Eira looked at her sister, her blue eyes flashing with determination. "Amelia, do you think the village elders are right? Could a storm like this really be caused by a curse?" Amelia nodded solemnly, brushing snow from her long braid. "Something about this winter feels unnatural, and if there's a chance we can find its source and stop it, we have to try." As they walked, Eira stomped her foot, causing a wave of snow to cascade down a hill, clearing a path. Amelia smiled and reached out, creating a thin layer of frost beneath their feet, allowing them to glide easily through the forest. After hours of trekking, they met a fox with a silver coat and eyes that gleamed like starlight. It sat directly in their path, as if waiting. When they paused, the fox spoke in a lilting voice. "Travelers, I am Tindra, and I know where you wish to go. Follow me if you wish to reach the frozen peak safely." Amelia and Eira shared a look, nodding in silent agreement, and followed Tindra into the dense forest. Along the way, Tindra warned them of dangers that lay ahead, enchanted trees that would try to trap them, shadows that whispered of their fears, and the ancient creature known as the Ice Sorceress, who was rumored to be the cause of the storm. Chapter 2: The Enchanted Palace. The frozen peak loomed ahead, an imposing mountain shrouded in mist and ice. As they approached, a grand palace, carved from solid ice and glittering like a crystal, emerged from the snow. They stepped inside, their breaths visible in the frozen air, and found themselves surrounded by walls covered in swirling frost patterns that seemed to dance and shift. Eira, entranced, reached out and touched the wall. The frost twisted and changed under her fingers, forming images of winter scenes, snow-covered forests, villages blanketed in white, and finally, two figures who looked eerily like Amelia and Eira themselves, locked in an eternal dance of ice and snow. Eira's fingers hovered over the icy wall for a moment, mesmerized by the delicate frost patterns shifting beneath her touch. As soon as her fingertips brushed the surface, the cold felt alive, pulsing as though the wall were a breathing, sentient thing. The frost began to swirl and reshape itself, forming a series of wintry scenes that unfolded like a story written in ice. First, she saw a vast, snow-covered forest, the trees heavy with frost, their branches draped in blankets of glistening white. The image shimmered and changed, now showing a small village buried under a perfect coat of snow, smoke drifting lazily from the chimneys of cozy cottages. Everything looked peaceful, untouched, a scene from a memory rather than real life. The cold in the air seemed to deepen, and Eira could almost hear the soft crackle of frozen branches and feel the silent weight of winter. As she continued to trace the images, the frost twisted once more, this time revealing two figures standing at the center of a swirling blizzard. Eira's breath caught. The figures were unmistakably her and Amelia, their forms etched in frost as they danced within the spiraling storm. They looked ethereal, as if they belonged to another world entirely, their cloaks billowing and faces softened by the pale, icy glow. Eira's pulse quickened. The icy figures were reaching toward each other, hands almost touching, their eyes locked in an intense, silent understanding. The wall seemed to whisper, filling her mind with fragments of something ancient and powerful. She could feel the magic of the palace merging with their own, an unspoken message woven into the frost that hinted at both their past and future. "Amelia," Eira whispered, her voice barely audible. "Look, it's us." Amelia, who had been watching in awe, stepped closer, her hand resting gently on Eira's shoulder. They stood together, transfixed by the image of themselves, figures encased in a timeless dance of ice and snow. As they gazed, a chill unlike any they'd felt before crept into the air, as if the very walls were warning them of something greater, something far beyond their understanding. Eira pulled her hand back, and the image faded, leaving only the faint trace of frost swirling back into randomness. Both sisters shared a look of wonder and a hint of fear. Whatever ancient magic had bound this palace seemed woven into their very souls, and somewhere within, a presence was watching, waiting for them to uncover its secrets. As they marveled, a voice echoed through the halls, cold and commanding. "Who dares to enter my palace unbidden?" A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, elegant woman with flowing silver hair and eyes as sharp and cold as ice shards. Her gown sparkled like frost under the moonlight, and her very presence chilled the air. This was Ailith, the legendary Ice Sorceress, who had once been a powerful protector of winter, but had since been twisted by her desire to control it completely. "You have my gift," she said, her gaze fixed on the sisters. "Yet you waste it on trifles. I have the power to create a winter that will last forever. Join me, and together we can reshape the world as we wish." Eira, indignant, clenched her fists, a snowstorm swirling at her feet. "We'd never help you. Winter isn't meant to rule forever. It's just one part of the year. Ailith's eyes narrowed, and with a wave of her hand, walls of ice shot up, trapping them. If you will not join me willingly, then I will take your powers by force. Chapter 3. The Challenge of Ice and Fire. Amelia and Eira found themselves surrounded by thick walls of ice. The air crackled with tension, and they knew a battle was inevitable. Summoning their strength, they combined their powers, sending streams of ice and snow hurtling toward Ailith. But the sorceress was powerful. She met each of their attacks with effortless counterspells, and the entire palace trembled with the force of their battle. Amelia and Eira stood back to back, their breath coming in sharp, visible puffs as they faced the Ice Sorceress, Ailith. The walls of ice towered around them, trapping them in a crystalline cage that shimmered with an eerie bluish light. Ailith's cold gaze was fixed on them, her silver hair flowing like a river of frost, her eyes glittering with a dangerous intensity. The air felt thick, vibrating with magic as a standoff hung between them. "Your powers are nothing compared to mine," Ailith sneered, her voice echoing off the icy walls. "You cannot hope to win." 2. But Amelia's expression was calm, determined. She met her sister's gaze with a nod, and they each raised a hand, summoning their magic from within. Eira's eyes flashed as she focused, her raw energy swirling around her fingertips, her magic wild and fierce. Amelia's power was calmer, precise, her hands weaving delicate patterns in the air, as ice crystals formed around her. Together, they were a force, a perfect balance of chaos and control. With a shout, they unleashed their combined magic. Streams of shimmering frost and blinding snow hurtled toward Ailith, spiraling together into a powerful torrent. The very air seemed to crackle and hum as their magic surged forward, creating waves of snowflakes that glittered like stardust. But Ailith raised her hand, her lips curving into a smirk. Effortlessly, she swept her arm in a wide arc, conjuring a barrier of ice that absorbed their attack. The shield exploded in a cloud of icy shards, scattering across the chamber. Ailith retaliated, sending sharp spears of ice hurtling toward the sisters. They barely had time to dodge, each spear embedding itself in the ground with a cold, resounding thud. "Is that the best you can do?" Ailith taunted, her voice icy and mocking. She raised both hands, and the walls around them trembled, forming sharp, jagged points that seemed to loom over them like frozen daggers, ready to strike at any moment. Amelia clenched her jaw, her mind racing. "Eira, we have to break her rhythm. Follow my lead." With a quick, fluid motion, Amelia formed a shield of delicate frost between them and Ailith. At the same time, Eira unleashed a powerful gust of wind, sending a blinding flurry of snow into Ailith's face. While the sorceress staggered back, caught off guard, Amelia and Eira moved as one, weaving in and out of the frost and shadows like phantoms. Ailith recovered quickly, her expression darkening. She drew on her own immense power, summoning a blizzard within the palace itself. The wind roared to life, and snow filled the air in a swirling vortex. It was as if the entire palace had come alive, responding to the sorceress's rage. Amelia and Eira could barely see each other through the storm, and the cold was biting, sharper than anything they'd ever felt. "We can't keep this up," Eira shouted, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "She's too strong." Amelia's mind raced, desperation tightening in her chest. Then she remembered the Firestone, the gem that could melt even the fiercest ice. She gripped her sister's hand, pulling her close. Eira, trust me. We need to channel our power together with the Firestone. It's our only chance. With a determined nod, Eira reached into her cloak and held up the glowing Firestone. Its warm golden light seemed to cut through the storm, casting a small circle of heat and light around them. Closing their eyes, they focused, pouring every ounce of their magic into the Firestone. The gem began to glow brighter, emitting a warmth that spread outward, melting the ice around them and slowly pushing back the blizzard. Ailith's eyes widened as the Firestone's power grew. She tried to counter their magic, summoning every bit of ice and snow to overwhelm them, but the warmth of the Firestone continued to expand, melting her attacks before they could even reach the sisters. "No," Ailith cried, her voice filled with rage and fear. She staggered back, weakened, her own magic beginning to falter. The icy walls around them started to crack, and the ground beneath them trembled as the palace itself seemed to react, its once solid structure now fragile, melting under the power of the Firestone. In one final, desperate attempt, Ailith raised her hands to summon a last, massive wave of ice. But as she did, Amelia and Eira released a final surge of energy through the Firestone, sending a blinding beam of warmth and light straight toward her. Ailith's spell shattered, the ice collapsing around her as she was engulfed by the Firestone's radiant light. When the light faded, Ailith stood in the center of the chamber, her power drained, her expression softened. She looked at the sisters, her face etched with a strange mixture of awe and regret. Slowly, she lowered her hands, the icy rage in her eyes replaced with a flicker of sorrow. "I only wished to preserve the beauty of winter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But in my desire for control, I forgot the heart of what winter truly is." The palace continued to melt around them, the storm outside calming as the walls shimmered and softened, transforming from jagged ice to a gentle frost. As the last of the magic faded, Ailith stepped forward, her form dissolving into the air like a delicate snowflake, her spirit finally at peace. Amelia and Eira shared a look of relief and understanding, their hands still joined as the palace around them glowed with the soft, golden light of the Firestone. They had not only defeated the sorceress, they had reminded her of the true beauty of winter, a beauty that was meant to be shared, not wielded as a weapon. Amelia, seeing her sister growing tired, reached out and whispered, "Eira, calm yourself. Think like water. Move around her, not through her." Eira took a steadying breath, and together they shifted their strategy, creating illusions of themselves in the shimmering frost. They darted and wove around Ailith, confusing her as they slowly drew closer. But Ailith, sensing their intent, summoned a blinding blizzard, and they lost sight of each other in the swirling snow. Separated from her sister, Amelia remembered the story of the Firestone, a gem hidden deep within the palace that could weaken any ice-based magic. She closed her eyes, letting her senses guide her towards a hidden passageway that led further into the palace. Eira, sensing her sister's absence, called out, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Chapter 4. The Firestone Quest. Following Tindra, who reappeared at her side, Amelia descended into the depths of the palace. They passed through twisting tunnels and icy caverns until they reached a massive door covered in ancient symbols. Tindra stepped forward, placing a paw on the door, and it swung open with a groan. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself as she gazed into the yawning darkness beyond the door. Tindra, her fox guide, moved gracefully beside her, his fur shimmering faintly in the dim light as he led her forward. The air was dense and cold, filled with a silence so profound it felt alive, pressing in on her as they crossed the threshold. The chamber they entered was vast, stretching out into a cavern that seemed as endless as the winter sky. Intricate frost patterns covered every surface, glinting like jewels in the faint light that filtered down from cracks above. Amelia's breath misted as she walked, her steps slow and careful on the slick, glassy floor. The ancient symbols etched along the walls radiated a faint blue glow, casting a surreal light over the entire space. "Where are we?" Amelia whispered, though her voice seemed too loud in the stillness. Tindra looked up at her, his eyes wise and calm. "This is the heart of winter," he replied softly, his voice echoing through her mind. "The source of all the magic that blankets the world in frost and snow." Amelia's gaze traveled to the far end of the chamber, where a colossal crystalline structure loomed. It was a pillar of pure, shimmering ice, pulsing faintly with an otherworldly light. The closer she got, the more she could feel its power. A cold so intense that it was almost warm, radiating through the air with a silent, ancient strength. Tindra nudged her gently. "To end Ailith's curse and restore balance, you must touch the heart and give it your warmth." Amelia hesitated, her heart pounding as she looked at the crystalline pillar. She could feel the immense energy flowing from it, swirling around her like a silent winter storm. Taking a deep breath, she reached out, her hand trembling as her fingers brushed the cold surface. As soon as her skin made contact, a wave of icy energy surged through her, nearly knocking her off her feet. She gasped, feeling a strange sensation, a melding of warmth and cold, like fire caught in an endless winter. Images began to flood her mind, visions of winters long past, of snowflakes falling silently over forests, of icy lakes stretching into the horizon. The power of the heart resonated with her own, intertwining, flowing through her as she let herself become part of it. She could sense Ailith's essence within the heart, her sorrow and loneliness etched into the very ice. "Your winter wasn't meant to be eternal," Amelia whispered, her voice shaking. "Winter is meant to rest and rejuvenate, to give way to spring." With that, she allowed a warm surge of magic to flow from her heart into the icy pillar. The heart of winter responded, its light growing brighter, filling the cavern with a blinding radiance. Cracks spread through the ice as the warmth broke through, releasing Ailith's dark magic from the heart, dispersing it like mist. When the light faded, the icy sheen over the chamber had softened and the cold had lifted. Tindra stepped back, his eyes filled with pride as he looked at Amelia. "You have restored the balance." The door opened, and Eira stood on the other side, relief flooding her face. She rushed over, embracing Amelia, as the warmth of their magic filled the cavern, bringing an end to the eternal winter. Together, with Tindra at their side, they left the heart of winter behind, knowing they had restored the true, delicate beauty of the season. Inside was a room illuminated by the warm glow of a gem embedded in a pedestal at its center, the Firestone. It pulsed with heat, melting the frost on Amelia's face as she approached. But as she reached for it, two snow leopards, with eyes as cold and watchful as Ailith's, padded out of the shadows, growling. Amelia, keeping calm, spoke softly. "We are here to restore balance, to save our village and all that winter should stand for." She extended her hand, sending a gentle wave of frost toward the leopards, who sniffed it curiously before stepping back, granting her access. Amelia picked up the Firestone, feeling its warmth spread through her fingers, and hurried back to find her sister. Chapter 5. The Final Confrontation. Reunited with Eira, who was relieved to see her sister safe, they returned to face Ailith, Firestone in hand. As they approached, Ailith sneered, sensing the artifact's power. But the sisters stood firm, holding the Firestone between them, its heat radiating outward. Amelia and Eira, their bond strengthened by the journey through the palace's depths, faced Ailith together, each of them holding a side of the Firestone. The gem's heat pulsed between them, a warm, steady glow that seemed to repel the bitter cold filling the air. The Firestone cast a golden light across their faces, and for the first time, Ailith's steely composure faltered. "So, you found it?" Ailith spat, her voice laced with disdain. She glared at the gem as if it were an abomination. "You think that little trinket will save you?" Amelia tightened her grip on the Firestone, her resolve hardening. "This isn't just a trinket, Ailith," she replied, her voice steady. "It's the warmth that winter is meant to shelter, the promise of spring and the balance you've lost." Ailith's expression twisted with anger, and she raised her hands, calling upon her icy magic. Sharp spears of frost and icy winds shot toward the sisters, but the Firestone's warmth radiated outward, dissolving Ailith's attacks into harmless wisps of mist. The palace itself seemed to groan and tremble as Ailith's power met the Firestone's. The two forces locked in a fierce struggle. Eira, drawing strength from her sister's determination, stepped forward, raising the Firestone higher. "You don't have to live in this endless winter, Ailith. There is still beauty in the balance of seasons." But Ailith shook her head, her face twisted in a mix of rage and desperation. "I made this winter, and it is mine," she screamed, channeling all her energy into a final, powerful spell. The very air froze, crystals forming so thickly that they threatened to block out the Firestone's light. The sisters felt the chill creep toward them, pushing back the warmth of the Firestone, inch by inch. 5. Seeing the frost encroach, Amelia and Eira looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. They joined hands around the Firestone, focusing every bit of warmth and love they had for each other, for their village, and for the winter itself. The Firestone responded, glowing so brightly that it filled the entire palace with a radiant warmth. Ailith stumbled back, shielding her eyes from the blinding light. The warmth spread outward, melting the thick frost and loosening the icy chains that bound the palace. The golden glow surrounded Ailith, softening her hard features and melting the darkness in her gaze. She gasped as memories of her past, of gentle snowfalls, of winters she once cherished, flooded her mind. The ice around Ailith cracked, and she sank to her knees, her power waning. "I forgot," she whispered, her voice broken. "I forgot what winter was meant to be." The sisters lowered the Firestone, the warmth of its magic gentling, enveloping Ailith in a soft, forgiving light. Slowly she looked up, her eyes no longer filled with anger, but with the weary regret of someone who had strayed too far. With a sigh, Ailith's icy hold on the palace loosened entirely. The walls softened, the frost fading as the natural balance was restored. Ailith gave a faint, sad smile as she looked at Amelia and Eira. "Thank you," she murmured, her form dissolving into snowflakes that drifted up and out through the open ceiling, vanishing into the calm winter sky. As the last of her magic faded, the storm outside quieted, the snow falling gently, blanketing the land in a peaceful stillness. The sisters, with Tindra by their side, held the Firestone close as they left the palace. With every step, they could feel the balance of winter and warmth restored, and knew that together they had brought a healing peace to the season once more. The Firestone's warmth began to weaken Ailith's magic, melting her icy defenses. She tried to fight back, summoning blasts of freezing wind, but her strength faltered. Finally, as she stood in defeat, her fierce expression softened and her shoulders sagged. Seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, Amelia spoke gently. "There was a time when you loved winter for its beauty, not for the control it gave you. We can see it in the way you built this palace and protected it. Let it go. Let winter be what it's meant to be, a season of peace and rest." Ailith hesitated, a flicker of remorse passing over her face. Slowly, she lowered her hands, releasing the storm's fury. The blizzard calmed, and the palace around them began to change, the ice shifting from sharp and jagged to soft and glistening, like new fallen snow. Chapter 6. A New Beginning. As the sun rose, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Ailith looked at the sisters, gratitude in her eyes. She placed a hand on each of their shoulders, her own icy magic mingling with theirs, strengthening their powers as a token of thanks. "Thank you for showing me the beauty of winter once more," she whispered, and with that, she faded into a gentle mist, her spirit finally at peace. The sisters returned to their village, their cloaks frosted, but their hearts warmed by the adventure. The villagers cheered, throwing confetti made of delicate snowflakes that danced in the air like stars. Each winter after that, when the first snowfall arrived, the village would remember the sisters and their courage. And Amelia and Eira, forever changed by their journey, would walk through the snow together, using their powers to bring beauty, peace, and a sense of wonder to their wintry world.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine, we hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching, and keep spreading the video story.